Joel, I have a question.
Yes.
When the minutes show that there's been specific details are in the staff report, which is online, how do I find those? Do I just go to the meeting date?
Right. Yeah. So where you need to go is go to the district site, and then from the district site, you'll need to hover where it says who we are, and then from there you'll be presented with a pull-down menu, and then you'll need to click on committees, and then from there off to the right-hand side, you'll see a listing of committees, and then you'll see for today's meeting, you'll find a WSP under the 5th bulleted point off to the right-hand side, and then you just scroll down. If it would be easier, I could go ahead and just send you the link to the WSP.
Well, that's all right. I know I wanted to explore the website anyway, but I just didn't know. So it starts out with who we are.
Right,
Come
exactly.
down from that. Okay.
Right.
I'll try that and see if I can manage it.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
It's pretty well organized.
You have to do some digging before you get to it. So I'll move over Mr. Laredo.
Everyone. Okay, we move Mr. Laredo over.
Yes.
Okay, call the meeting to order. Water supply meeting, committee meeting of Monterey Peninsula Water Management District for Monday, May 1st, 2023 at 3:01. Roll call, please.
Committee member Paul,
Here.
committee member Riley,
Here.
Chair Edwards.
Here.
All committee members are present.
All right. First action item. Oh, excuse me. Comments from the public. We have any public today?
We have no public attendees.
Okay. And we'll take it to the first action item. Jim, what we got?
The first and only action item is consider adoption of the minutes of the March 6th meeting.
Okay,
Move approval.
we have first.
Second.
We have a second.
Yeah, I'll second.
All right, Director Paul. Okay. Any public out there for comment?
No public attendees.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Committee member Paul,
Yes.
committee member Riley,
Aye.
Chair Edwards.
Aye,
The motion passes.
thank you. Jim, first discussion item.
Yep. So this is just to let the committee know where we're headed. A couple of these will impact budget. But as a result of the Pure Water Monterey project, we, the district, have now found ourselves under the definition of an urban water supplier / wholesaler. Basically, if you serve or deliver more than 3,000 acre feet annually, you are a wholesaler. And we did so with the first full year of deliveries of the Pure Water Monterey project. Now, there are 6 state reporting portals or requirements, 4 of which are active and 2 of which are becoming active as new. And I've noticed that even the state is inconsistent in how they report their requirements. So in the staff report, you'll see a diagram that shows urban water suppliers who are wholesalers have to submit the monthly conservation report. That's not true. There's specifically an exemption for the wholesalers. And then on the electronic annual report, it said that all public water systems, including water wholesalers, are supposed to submit. And then elsewhere it says only the water retailers are supposed to submit. So we'll clarify all of these things. But the 2 primary ones that I wanted to draw your attention to, one is the 5-year urban water management plan. And curiously, a wholesaler can combine with the local retailer or several entities can combine into a regional urban water management plan. Based on past experience and our interaction with CalAm, we feel that that's an unlikely outcome. I mean, we don't even agree on the demand forecast, so it's unlikely we can agree on, multiple tables and representations in the urban water management plan. Technically, we were supposed to, within the first year of becoming an urban water supplier, file an urban water management plan. I think at this point, because we're a year away from the filing for the 2025, I'll get together with Maureen and John, and we'll decide whether we want to go through the exercise solely for a one-year submittal and then have it updated again with the submittal by June 1st of 2026.
Dave,
Yeah.
Given the forthcoming dispute as to whether or not we have this is a latent power or an actually exercise power as a water supplier, I would see other advantages to actually filing and having the report that we could point to.
Yeah, I hear you. And we are, we've already crossed that bridge as a supplier, as a wholesaler. So, I get your point.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll need to budget for it, which is something we haven't done previously. So there you have it. And then the other is this now relevant as an outcome of the SB 606 and AB 1668, this annual water supply and demand assessment, which the requirement began in July of last year, is something we will need to look into compliance for. So this is just new, and to Dave Laredo's point and Director Edwards' previous, multiple occasions, he said, got to start behaving more like the utility. Well, we do have requirements on us now as a wholesaler, so we'll get those into the queue, but they'll require, third-party help and so forth. So you'll be seeing that come back as budget items. And this was purely informational, but if you have any questions or conversations, do it.
Yeah, Dave, through the chair.
Go ahead.
How does the fact that we also serve several we provide retail service to a few customers. So how does that impact our the reporting requirements that we're subject to?
Right. Yeah. So we're way under the 3,000 customer limit. So from a retailer standpoint, we didn't trigger any reporting requirements.
But Dave, I'd like to suggest you might give some thought as to how burdensome would it be to report, even though we're not required to report.
Yeah, we'll have to line all of that up. We've been planning on using the models of, like Metwater and Santa Clara Valley Water District and other wholesalers to determine what goes in our urban water management plan. But from the standpoint of the other piece, and by the way, there are also annual reporting requirements for recycled water producers. So, for example, Monterey One Water now has certain specific reporting requirements, and they just submitted their annual report to the Division of Drinking Water, and it's like 1,200 pages.
Jesus.
So, ours won't have the same because that includes a lot of water quality data. But as of right now, there is a Title 22 reporting requirement on the reclamation project that COD and PVCSD do. But with that idea in mind, yes, Dave Laredo, I think to the extent there is reportable action for those retail customers, then yeah, we should start building the foundation for
It helps tell our story.
Yep.
And through the
Go ahead,
chair,
George.
a quick question about whether the district and CalAm can get together or agreement on things. I understand the supply and demand numbers, there's no agreement on that. But is it is it worthwhile pointing out the differences of opinion if there is a findings issue here? I'm just kind of raising a question, not that I know there might not be an answer.
Right. Yeah, so we wrote at length in our testimony about the public review period for the 5-year urban water management plan of Cal-Am, and how it was kind of specifically set up that the draft was made available on a Thursday afternoon with a hearing scheduled for the following Thursday, meaning you would only have a weekend to review it. Actually, the hearing was, I think, on the following Wednesday. So obviously nobody had any comments, and it was heard and adopted at that hearing. So there was, no room for making changes and bringing it back. Whereas like Marina Coast Water District puts theirs out a month ahead of their hearing and solicits actual feedback. So we've been in a position where in previous urban water management plans, we've provided quite a bit of commentary through the Water Demand Division and my office, and it's never found its way into a document. So we can express a desire for a little more close cooperation, but the two things that are kind of out of sync right now is they're only on a 5-year cycle, and to follow through on what Dave Laredo says, to meet our 1-year requirement to get started next year, they don't even have a due date of anything for next year. So we would be submitting solely as a wholesaler. And then we could broach the subject going into the 2025 filing as to whether or not they want to do something cooperatively. But, as I've said, past experiences, they really don't want a joint.
I'm less interested in whether we cooperate or not, but the fact that it's not happening, is that worth a finding? And that's all I'm just raising. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So here's a question for you, GM. This is going to be in the next budget,
Yep, it'll have to be.
so we'll be talking about it more to the full board during the budget cycle.
Yep. Yeah, it'll go onto the project list as a project.
Okay. We'll talk about project during the budget session, because I don't want a bunch of projects that don't get done and they carry it over to mid-year. We got to stop doing that. That's like banking money and we don't do it. So I have a problem with that. So let's put the ones on that we're going to get done so we know what we need to get done. Okay, if no more committee questions, let's take it out to the public. Go ahead
sure.
there.
Just a quick comment, if I may, Chair Edwards. I know this represents a pile of work, an additional pile of work for the district, but since we have to do it anyway, at the risk of saying what's obvious, it actually could represent an opportunity to really sort of describe in a compelling way what the district does. The conservation report, the demand and supply and demand assessment. I know we do this other places, and we've done this in your testimony. We've done it in annual report in other places, but it could also be done in a compelling way in this report to show the water supply planning and conservation, all the work that we do. And if there are difficulties with coordination, that could even possibly be mentioned if it's relevant.
I agree with you. Any other questions? If none, let's take it out to the public, Joel.
Yes, so if you would like to make public comment on item number 2, please raise your hand, found on the Zoom application. Chair Edwards, I see no raised hands.
Okay, this is a discussion item. All right, Jim, what's the next one?
The next one is an update on Pure Water Monterey expansion. Pretty much it tracks the verbal description I gave at the board meeting for the full board, but construction documents were put out on the street April 17th. There's expected to be an award by M1W on July 31st, I believe. And we will, once we see the returns from potential contractors, we'll have a better understanding of what the ultimate price is and what the financing amount under the WIFIA loan will look like. The schedule is completion towards the end of the third quarter of 2025. But of course, we'll get a better sense once we've got contractors actually on board. With respect to the grants, you may recall we have two, which are the Department of Water Resources Urban Community Drought Relief Grant, and then one through the governor's budget. M1W has the other two grants. They're pretty much on top of theirs, as well as their WIFIA loan. On our Urban Community Drought Relief Grant, we actually have an agreement in place, a signed agreement. Maureen has reviewed it. Simona Mosbacher has it. That one basically is just waiting for us to start expending monies and then requesting reimbursement. Maureen, you're on. They gave us an advance payment alternative. We don't expect to use that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. They did send us a whole bunch of examples of deliverables and criteria and so forth. So we're pretty much on top of that drought relief grant. The 4.8 million, we do not have a funding agreement in place. It's being run through the State Water Board, Division of Financial Assistance, and the person in charge there has been very positive and upbeat, saying, nope, you guys are ahead of the curve. You've done everything you need to do. We're just waiting on a draft funding agreement to come back. So I have to take him at face value. I will be up in Sacramento on the 23rd. So I'm hoping to set up an in-person meeting just to touch base, and maybe we'll learn a little bit more at that point. But we need a funding agreement. I'm assuming it's going to be a reimburse upon presentation of invoices. But we just don't have any information on that yet. So we're in pretty good shape there. With respect to source water, one of the directors inquired whether there's been any update, and there really hasn't been anything new since the November 24th workshop that was a second workshop that Monterey One Water presented. I know that some of our board listened in on that workshop. I included all the slides to this staff note. The only conclusion, I think, if you went all the way to the second to last slide, third to last slide, fourth to last slide. The conclusions are that there's enough source water not to impact the reclamation project, that the County Water Resources Agency has chosen not to participate in the new source water facilities, meaning they're not competing for the output, but in effect, they're being granted the right to use the agricultural wash water. The rights for water usage have been reaffirmed by Monterey One Water. And I think the only thing of note that I wanted to point out is I think we've all agreed that during times of drought or extended drought, there is a likelihood that we will have to hit the operating reserve to meet the annual delivery requirements. So nevertheless, that's the one area we'll keep our eye on as a prolonged drought scenario. But other than that, I think that what you found, if you either listened to that presentation or just thumbed through, is there is sufficient water to meet both the base project and the expansion without having conflicting source water discussions. And then finally, let me get back to the staff note. There we go. Just on in terms of the other infrastructure, we did learn that CalAm is working with the school district on the site for extraction wells 1 and 2, but there's not been much progress on that. And then the filing, the advice letter filing for the parallel pipeline has been done, and the Carmel Valley pump station is likely to be done here in short order. What we're encouraging is that the company should get immediately trying to make progress on extraction wells 1 and 2, because it's been shown that those are necessary simply for redundancy and to wean them off of ASR's wells number 3 and 4. So we'll be encouraging them to get moving on that. We did offer in a conference call late last week to do whatever we can to help them with the school district to get moving on those easements. So that concludes this report as well.
Okay,
Question.
questions? Fran, I see your hand up.
Yes, Dave, on CalAm's movement on extraction wells 1 and 2, have we documented any of this in formal correspondence to whomever we're dealing with there?
Not yet.
Yeah, well, I think we need to document, and if you're dealing with Ian Crooks and copying Chris and Halloran or whomever, I think we need to lay down a paper trail.
Yeah.
Because I was noticing, for comparison, Rancho Cañada, they had seen it. It's not the same, but it's the let's drag our feet because it suits our purpose not to spend money at this point. Rancho Cañada started slowing down in 2015, and now they're trying to say, well, we'll get it online in 2025. How much notice do you need to move on these things? So just based on the history that we've had and what we're still going through with this project, there are outstanding matters before the administrative law judge and commissioner. So I would encourage that.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Any up? Go ahead, Ed. Director
Yeah,
Brown,
that's
go
a
ahead.
little along the lines. I feel like CalAm has the slows and they keep showing us the slows, like they don't move very fast. And I like that idea, Fran. I had another question about, first of all, I think their presentation, I didn't watch the presentation at Monterey 1, but I'm going through their PowerPoint. My God, it's hard to follow their PowerPoint. They don't give enough substance or verbs to describe what's going on. They list a lot of things, and there's must be a lot going on, but man, it's hard to follow.
Yeah, you need the body in the room. I agree with you, and I'm not even going to attempt to be that person.
Well, and then the one thing I wanted to comment on, which it's more of a question as well, but they said the CSIP volume, they maxed out, and they didn't, and then they were criticizing Monterey 1 for not providing more water. Well, when the agreement has a certain maximum and then you max out, somebody's got to explain to the growers that, you know, you've maxed out, period. But my point is that why did they max out? And two points were made in the PowerPoint. One was the just they reached the maximum, and the other was the drought. But I'm wondering if there's a third issue. Have they planted more strawberries or something in that same area where the demand was increased because of their action? And then, of course, criticizing Monterey 1 isn't justified, but was there more of a crop acreage expansion in the CSIP area?
Well, I don't know if it's Jennifer who's online as an attendee, but I'm not going to put her on the spot from Monterey 1 Water. Cropping patterns do change. The maxing out is because it's a real-time system. There's no storage per se. small pond. And so if you use all of the influent to the plant in a month that's available, then you're going to max out. And so that's, so it's not like a numerical limit in a contract that said, oh, you hit your limit and there's no more. If they could have taken more and there was more, they would have produced more and taken more from that standpoint. And then, of course, the growers were complaining, hey, we're pumping more than ever, which would be symptomatic of less inflow to the plant being available, which it is. It's down. Salinas is down just like the peninsula is down due to conservation activities. And I don't think that the growers really understood that. So in their mind, it had to be that somehow pure water was taking water away from them. Obviously they were pumping more than they had been in the past, but it was really a byproduct of being in drought, having less influence, and being unable to produce more than what comes into the plant. And so that I think they began to understand the reality. I don't think it changed their mind. I mean, John Bailey, who's the current chair of the County Water Resources Agency, would love to shift this whole thing and say, well, in the summer months, you shouldn't even take what you're contractually allowed to take for pure water Monterey. You should satisfy all of our growers' needs first, and then if there's anything left, you can apply it to pure water Monterey, which is not the way it works. But there's a better understanding now, I think, as a result of 2 or 3 of these workshop attempts by Monterey One. But you're right, it's confusing going chart to chart if you don't have the speaker there with you.
Go ahead there, Director Paul.
Yeah, well, I agree. And so there are, I don't have the complete picture because I had a lot of questions going through the slides, but I do come away, I do understand that the different resources have to be optimized. They reach the conclusion that the resources are sufficient if they are optimized, and if reserves may have to be used on dry or drought years during the summer. So are there, what I don't know, because I don't really understand what all the specific sources are and who controls each of them, how much coordination is required to optimize, and are there problems with that coordination that need to be addressed? And if so, can we identify those problems? Can we figure out a way to address any problems with coordinating so that the resources can be optimized?
Yeah, I think what we're going to see is a little bit like last summer, where luckily we've had so much rain that the Salinas River Diversion Facility, or the rubber dam, is available. But once the growing season got really underway last year, Monterey One Water was making a number of decisions based on needs of the recipients. So kind of at the production end, trying to take care of the growers while still meeting the pure water Monterey 3,500 acre foot criterion. But they did a lot of that on their own without consultation to us. And we had specific questions about, hey, don't forget, we've got the operating reserve that needs to be filled and so forth. So I'm a little concerned there. The other place of concern is the ponds. If the growers, like last year when it was drought and there was no rubber dam, they needed water earlier. And so the use of the ponds is kind of a 3-part decision: Monterey One Water, the City of Salinas, and County Water Resources Agency. I think that communication is sufficient, that they've gotten pretty good at communicating. But we need to get through another cycle just to see for sure. Our biggest concerns are now that Marina Coast Water District has come online and that there is an irrigation-based need. They're going to peak in the summer, the same time the growers peak for the growing season, which means the demands for or the remaining available for Pure Water Monterey deliveries to Cal-Am company water may be stressed. And so we always need to look hard at that. But, you know, as the current situation, we just closed out April, and we have now delivered the full 3,500 acre feet for the fiscal year, plus an additional 9.2 acre feet that we put into the reserves. So, you know, we're looking at a May and June where there's no worries about delivering to Cal-Am. We want to continue to fill our operating reserve up to the minimum requirement that's due. But it makes it a little easier now that they can listen more carefully to the growers' needs. Marina Coast Water District can take a little more of their summer irrigation water for the golf courses. And we should be okay. So it's constant communication. But, you know, Marine's in pretty good communication with them. We do our monthly updates. We share reports like today, you know, the report went to New Jersey on the delivery side and then went to Monterey One Water on the balances side. And so communication's pretty good. I haven't seen anything that makes us worry yet.
Thank you.
Has, through the chair, has the contentiousness between ag and Monterey One on the source water and the use and so on, has that kind of subdued a little bit? Sounds like the communication systems seem to be working a little better, maybe. And maybe now that it's a fact and all the agreements have, all the approvals have been provided so far, maybe that contentiousness is, I don't know, getting reduced. I hope so.
Yeah, I would say no. I would say the manner of communication is friendlier, but the message is still kind of the same. I mean, you know, I sat in on Paul Schuda making yet another presentation to the County Water Resources Agency board about source waters. This would be maybe a month ago. And they were very cordial. They were very complimentary about the presentation, thanking Paul for being there. But the underlying message was, we don't like the way this is working, and we think you're using up more water in the months where we, the growers, can use it. And we'd like to come up with a different system. And, you know, we've got 30-year financing based on the current system. And it's kind of hard to just, you know, go back to the drawing board when you're in the middle of an obligated security.
So Dave, where are we with the source waters? Are we okay with them? If there's a problem with them, do they have to go through us to change
No,
anything?
vice versa. So, you know, the two areas of contentiousness, now that the word is applicable in so many ways, have always been supply and demand figures. And that's been the district's purview. And then the source waters, which have been pretty much Monterey One Water's purview. And you can even see it reflected in our testimony in the proceeding for the water purchase agreement, and who's making more workshop presentations on one topic to their board in public and the other topic. So the way it works is when somebody says, oh, pure water expansion isn't going to get you enough water for the 2,250 acre feet you expect. I say, well, we've got 3 signatures on an agreement, and I signed it on behalf of the district, knowing that if we can't deliver, there will be financial penalties. And then I turn to Paul and I say, Paul, are you promising me you can deliver the source waters that are needed to produce the water that you've promised under this agreement, for which if I have penalties, I will sue you? And then Paul goes, yeah, Dave, we're all good. So that's kind of the dynamic, which is we have to trust in their expertise. But boy, they've gone back into this topic so many times. with their engineering team and their consultants. And I've listened to their presentations, and I do know that of the 14 potential source waters, when we started the SEIR, we had kind of a different recipe, a different mix of those source waters, and it was probably, in my mind, a little more drought resilient than the current mix. But the current mix is easier for them to defend on a legal availability basis, which all told says, okay, so you're still good, and there's other waters out there, but you've identified those that are less controversial, and you're still good. And so that's good. That also means that there's still some waters out there that we could perhaps draw on if needed. And then there's, this kind of right of first refusal issue where if there is wastewater and the growers are unable to use it, we're able to use it. And so we've shown that Monterey One Water can run this plant hard in December, January, February, and March. And we know that there's additional source waters available then. So we're still kind of finding our way, but we know that we'll be able to run the plant even harder in periods of time when there's more source waters available. So we may get to a point where we front load an annual delivery requirement a little bit. We're still finding out.
Okay, Fran, you got your hand up.
Yes, Dave, has Paul Shudo done a presentation at a regular board meeting for MPWMD?
Boy, not for a while. I mean,
The reason I ask is, we're still not set for phase 2 on the supply and demand issue. And we saw our friends from the Salinas Valley in the grower category vigorously opposing the approval in phase 1 of the amended water purchase agreement. I'm wondering two things. One is this something where Paul could actually do a presentation to the board and our interested public members, since we are an equal partner in this project, and we would have an opportunity to ask questions, because I agree with some of the other comments. I've looked at his charts, I've listened to some of the workshops, and it's awfully hard to get through those source waters and where are we now and what's our best source. The other question I have is, I remember Paul saying, particularly in the winter, there's excess effluent that is flowing out to the ocean that they don't process. And is this part of what you're saying as far as front loading that through Pure Water Monterey and injecting it ahead of what the scheduled 350 acre feet per month would be, but because of the availability that this reconfiguration or capturing what is a viable source of winter water and making it work for us instead of going to the ocean with effluent in it, bottom line.
Yeah, I don't think that they'll ever be able to get to the zero discharge point. You'd need a peak. You need a third piece of the water project to pick up all of the remaining wastewater. But what we're seeing is, as they were kind of putting themselves through the paces, there's more unused water available in those months because there's, the growing season issues. They ran it really hard last month, pretty hard the month before. So they're still learning what the plant's capability is. And so, yes, that's what I'm referring to is you can't get all the peaks, but you can capture excess water if you can run more consistently close to 5 million gallons per day. And then, of course, when the expansion's done, whatever that new capacity is. So as they get better at it, there's more opportunity to do just what you said, front load against the deliveries. And that's basically what we played with this year that we didn't do last year, which is why we have the month of May and the month of June to, really catch up on our reserve. If we were to be in the same place, next year, we wouldn't have that same reserve catch up. And so we'd have water that we wouldn't know what to do with. Well, now that we're doing the expansion, we're going to need to put more water into the reserve. So if we're in the same situation, we may just front load our own reserve requirements. But eventually, once you meet the minimum reserve amount, if you're in this position where you can actually run the plant, get more water, and still meet the summer irrigation needs of everyone else, we may have surplus water from time to time. And I think right now our attitude is, let's go ahead and purchase it as the district and build up a drought reserve until we figure out that we've just got too much water. And but it's not predictable yet, because as I said, they're still learning how to operate their plants. I do think that because Paul's organization wants to get out of phase 2, they basically want to say, are you done picking at the source water issue? And if Cal IMCS says, yes, we're done picking at the source water issue, we've decided to do the expansion. We expect you to deliver 2,250 acre feet, and we're not going to discuss that as a supply issue anymore. Then they can get out from having to produce more testimony and spend more dollars at Perkins Coie.
That would be good.
Yeah, which would be good. But if they can't, then this issue will get revisited. But if they, either way, if they have to remain in because source water becomes a recurring question, we should be able to get Paul to come over and give a presentation to our board or whomever from Monterey One. Or if they're successful in getting the sign off that source water is going to be there and it's going to be 2250, well, that's still a good reason to come over and tell us how you got the sign off. You know, what is the final decision? So I think we should look to that. I'd like to see what phase 2 looks like. You know, I'm assuming here in the next month and a half, we'll get kind of a new scoping. But yeah, we'll put in a request to Monterey One to maybe come speak with us on the June board meeting. We have a lot on the June board meeting schedule because of that long consent and, you know, all the renewal of the annual contract. So
Well, let's make it in
see where it
July.
fits.
Make it in July. You
Yeah.
ain't got to pile it all on. Here's a question for you. That bypass, y'all said y'all signed, do we have to sign off on that letter of useful with the
No.
bypass?
No,
Okay.
but we don't object to it.
We don't object to it, but is it working right?
Yeah,
Is it a two-way bypass?
yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get to, because it's not, hey, I want somebody to say something about it. We can't let these things go through because they want them to go through and they're not working the way they said they work. It was a $6 million bypass, it ended up being an $8 million bypass.
Well,
So-
and not only that, our friends at Caliam managed to pat themselves on the back for having gotten it built and brought online to save the day on ASR injection.
Well, it didn't save too much on this year's, much they wasted.
No, but there was a press piece that said, yeah, and look, you know, if we hadn't done that parallel pipeline, we wouldn't have had ASR injection this year, and made it sound like a real positive. But
Okay, and another one on the grants, I heard that Monterey One talked to Seaside about the well and easements. So all their grants should be taken care of by now, that they can continue on. Because they said the Seaside is going to is about what they're doing about looking at the property. So we should be moving on right there. And Dave, the timeline for construction, could we get a copy of that when that is done by Monterey One Water?
yeah, as soon as we get back into the Gantt charts, which they said may start up again next month, we'll make it available for our board.
Okay, Director Rowley, go
Yeah,
ahead.
my last point is if the County Water Resource Agency, if we have a presentation from Monterey One, I wouldn't mind inviting County Water Resource Agency to give any counterpoint to what the discussion is, so we have the full picture of where that is, unless that's a bad idea, but
Yeah,
for
we'll know.
information purposes, it might be useful.
Yeah, they just hired a new general manager last week, and they're interviewing deputy general managers. So when they get kind of a little more stable, we can engage the Water Resources Agency as well.
Okay, any other questions? Let's take that one out to the public and see any questions on that one, Joel.
Yeah, so if you have public comment on this matter, please raise your hand. Chair Edwards, I do see one raised hand.
Go ahead. Give them 3 minutes.
Got it. And at this time, I would like to invite Susan Schiavone. Susan, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Hello, thank you very much. I just wanted to note that I did attend some of those workshops at M1, and I do remember them saying that one of the problems was that one of the ponds or the intake ponds had gotten clogged up, and they needed to work out an agreement on more regular maintenance so that the intake wasn't going in during that time when they had the overuse issue. And also the fact that the growers, on the day that the problem happened, everybody pumped at the same time. And so they aren't staggering at all in terms of their usage. So there was a suggestion to possibly get them to agree to do some staggering in terms of their water. I know water needs to happen when it needs to happen, but that was one of the issues that came up that I remember. And they all peaked out at once. And then they also accused Pure Water Monterey of using more water than they were allowed to. And I know Paul did a research on that. And when he came back to the table to tell them, it turns out that they went over on their water by quite a bit. And the MW Monterey 1 on Pure Water Monterey went over just a little bit. So that clearly wasn't a real thing that they should have accused them of. So I hope they can continue to have the conversation and reduce some of this conflict, because it is still pretty intense in terms of what the growers seem to be having an impression about Pure Water Monterey taking their water. So I hope that can get worked out. Thank you.
Yeah, I can just add that Susan's right. So even if we we know what water is available when, the Blanco drain, for example, had, you know, how they use plastic sheeting a lot in, you know, out in the fields. But you get a bad windstorm, big old piece of plastic gets lifted up, it drops it in the drain, it goes to the intake facility, and now you're clogged up, and so you don't have the capacity you want. The industrial ponds, you know, it's an aeration to the sky and an infiltration through the scarified open pits. But when you get certain level of water in there and the sunlight goes through, it becomes a breeding ground for algae. And if you get a big algae bloom, you can't just grab that water and bring it over and treat it the same way. And so there's some of these practical limits that are still, you know, kind of being worked out, the kinks over time, but they do have an impact on, you know, that particular source water. So if the ag ponds are an algae bloom, you can't rely on it, even though you know that water's there in acre feet. Same thing with the Blanco drain. The water may be there, but, and then we have a bypass flow requirement, just like we have on the river for ASR. You got to have minimum flow. There's flow requirements on the Salinas River that in low water periods, we have to let water bypass for fish flows and for lagoon water quality, even though we're watching it going, wait, that's our water. You know, that's one of the sources that are legally committed by the County Water Resources Agency with the Blanco drain and reclamation ditch. So whole variety of practical limitations.
I have a question about that. Who's responsible for maintaining the drain and the ditch? This was mentioned in the presentation as one of the challenges.
Yeah, so I think, and I don't, and Maureen, weigh in if you can, but I think that the intakes are really Monterey One waters to maintain. But the drains themselves, if they're filling up with plastic and so forth, that would fall to the County Water Resources Agency. But I think part of delineating who's responsible for what and how often is something that, was just learned this year and talked about this year.
And
It
Dave,
sounds like that's one of the, I'm sorry, Director Edwards, it sounds like that's one of the optimization issues is to make maximum use of those resources, the drain and ditch maintenance has to be.
Yeah.
Dave, one more final question from me. Do we have a staff member to monitor recycled water over there in Monterey 1 committee meeting?
You mean the recycled water committee?
Yes. Do we have a staff member?
Yeah, I don't think we have it assigned. It's not assigned to anyone in particular. We just usually check the agenda and then attend if need be. Well,
okay. I think that's something that you all should look at, since I got all you on there that might be doing it. It's something, because they're always talking about the water over there. They're always talking about it. So I think pure water is the main thing, and it comes up at every meeting. And I listen to them. I listen to the regular board meeting, but I think for the foreseeable future, we should have a staff member just monitor what's going on. Just listening in makes a big difference, because they see me listening in. They come up with, well, we got a problem with this, we got a problem with that. So be nice to know.
Yeah, it's a good
Okay.
recommendation.
Thank you. Next item, GM, please.
Item 4 is a discussion item. This is just a snapshot for you to better understand what we're looking at and what we're facing in the near term versus long term. And what I did is I showed you how kind of how we stand today with the 3 what I call firm supply sources. Pure Water, the base project, the Carmel River limit, and the Seaside Basin really limit as well for Cal-Am. Total 8,350 acre feet per year. Our 5-year average demand is a little over 9,700. Frankly, in the last 3 years, it's hovered more around 9,600. But what that shows you is, we've got a 1,300 to 1,200 acre foot annual shortfall, which has to be made up by, these additional supply sources, which include Table 13 water rights, of which some have been created and utilized this year because of rain. ASR, either the annual yield or pulling from reserves from stored water. Sand City desal, and Malpaso entitlements. And this is where, in the meantime, if we didn't get to date, about 1,156, I believe, acre feet was at the time of the staff note into ASR, all we would have had in ASR is about 1,400 acre feet. Without rain, we would have gotten no Table 13 water rights this year. Sand City desal, we were informed on a call that due to permitting issues with the Division of Drinking Water, that new intake well may not happen in the next couple of quarters or even this year. But you need every little tiny piece of water until the pure water expansion comes online. Now, luckily, if we hire contractors, and if Monterey 1 awards July 31st, and they mobilize and get out there sometime in August, then you're looking at an August 2025 completion date, so about 2 years. And so if your shortfall is 1,200 to 1,300 acre feet per year, over 2 years, that's 2,600 acre feet. Well, it looks to me like now we will have the stored water from ASR in excess of that amount. And if you get something out of Sand City desal, something out of Malpaso, and something out of Table 13, and maybe even some carryover credits on the Seaside Basin, that we're going to be fine for the next 2 years waiting for the expansion to come online. But that's, you know, that's really how tight it is. It is a, if this was not a rainy winter, we would be looking at, you know, if there was a continued delay in the expansion, we would be looking at reducing our reserves, banked water, and then not having enough water on a current basis to make it a third year in a row. So we've been very fortunate with the rains. You can see on the second page of the staff note that there is always that option of calling on pure water reserve water, but that would require kind of a side agreement with Cal-Am, waiving the minimum operating reserve requirement for a period of time. But there is that additional water that does sit in the ground. So I think that's an important piece of knowledge to have. Now, after the expansion, which is the second half of the staff notes, the firm supplies become 10,600 acre feet. And you compare that to our 5-year average demand of 9,700, we will be in a surplus mode. And, you know, there's always going to be some annual production that's available if it rains for Table 13 and ASR deposits. And there's always going to be something from Sand City, desal, and Malpaso. So what we'll be doing is heading into an era with the completion of the expansion where annually we should have too much water when compared with the demand requirements. So I think what we're toying with at this point in time is instead of initiating, so what Cal-Am has done is they said, well, when the desal plant comes online, then they'll start the in-lieu recharge program for the Seaside groundwater basin. We've said that these numbers do not indicate that a desal plant is needed to come online. So don't worry about it. But we do agree that the in-lieu recharge program for the Seaside groundwater basin is important. So I think what we're recommending right now is, depending on what kind of water years we have for the next 2 water years, is not starting immediately with the Seaside in-lieu recharge program, but rather instead bank the first 3 to 5 years of surplus in the Pure Water Monterey expansion as if it's banked ASR storage, build up a drought reserve there, and then go ahead and start the 700 acre feet per year in-lieu recharge program. Don't build the desal plant, and monitor what your progress is in terms of exceeding your projected demand or not, and then see how it all works out. But clearly, in the very first few years of post pure water expansion, there's going to be more water than we know what to do with, and there's no level of pent up demand or the issuance of building permits that can turn that assumption on its head and suddenly gobble up all new possible water that's going to be produced. So we'll be looking at what that transition period really means, hopefully getting cooperation out of Cal-Am on what to do during that transition period. But it looks pretty good. And so our biggest concern has been, with a delay in pure water expansion and an even longer delay in desal, was how are we going to get through the next few years? And now, because we're going to do the expansion, it's how do you get through the construction period? And that's what this staff memo was intended to address. And I think we're in good shape.
Director Rowley?
Adding to the reserve or backfilling the reserve or protecting and expanding the reserve, that's a budget item, isn't it? Don't we have to pay for that at the time?
Yeah, if it's pure water reserve from the base project, that would be on our dime. The practical reality, what's going to happen when the expansion comes online, is the way Cal-Am negotiated the contract was they'll take all of the expansion production. Well, we know that demand is not going to exceed the total supply available. So they're going to take that. If they take it in lieu of pumping the Seaside Basin or in lieu of their legal limit on the Carmel River, then they'll use it all. But if they also take their more affordable resources or cheaper resources, which is groundwater from the Seaside Basin and pumping from the Carmel River, then that pure water expansion water, they will have paid for, but it'll still remain in storage. So it's going to have the same effect of building up a reserve, but that won't be on our dollars, that'll be on their dollars.
Any other-
So when does that get determined though? Is it year to year, cycle, season to season?
No, it'll be, well, so what they'll be faced with is a contract that says they have to take 5,750 acre feet. If demand doesn't materialize as soon as or even at the same level as they've shown in their urban water management plan, they're going to have access to water, meaning the 5,750 they have to take from Pure Water Monterey, and then 3,376 that they're able to take from the river, and 1,474 that they're able to take from the Seaside Basin. And even if you drop that down to 774, assuming they're going to in lieu recharge the basin, they're potentially going to have supplies that exceed their demands for quite some time. And so the only way you bring that into balance is to bank some water or not take out some water. And of course, our preference would be that they have cheap supplies coming out of the Seaside Basin and out of the Carmel River, that they would choose to use those. But then they also have this, new manufactured Pure Water Monterey expansion water that they're going to have to take anyway. So it
seemed to me they'd make more money if they took Carmel River and Seaside Basin water. And that probably is the underlying, principle they operate under.
Well,
that's just an opinion.
Yep.
Karen, any questions? Okay, just a couple from me. Sand City Wells for the desal plant. Are we hearing that it's going to take a little bit more time to get that done, or is that something we can document?
No, that's what we were told last week, that the response the specifications and response from the state Division of Drinking Water is slowing things down.
Okay. And the recharge, do we have to talk to the water master if we want to delay that 700 acre feet recharge that's supposed to happen? I don't know if that's a court ruling, but I don't know if they put a date when it should be started.
Yeah,
So
that one's between Cal-Am and the water master. And I think what we will try to do is present a logical time frame when that can get started. So as I mentioned during my discussion, Cal-Am's shown on several occasions that they wouldn't start that until the desal plant comes online. All of our supply and demand analysis assumes that that program comes online and the desal plant is never built. So I think we're just at the point where if the world comes around to our view, then we'll need to have some discussion about when is it best to start that in lieu recharge. If the world doesn't come around to our view, then we'll just leave it alone and assume that it gets started when the desal plant comes online, which is not on the horizon right now. So I don't know what more to say on that, but that is CalAM's program and promise that it's made with the water master.
Okay, and Joel, take it out to the public, find out. who on the house.
Yes. So if you would like to make public comment on this matter, please raise your hand located on the Zoom application. Chair Edwards, I see no raised hands, so I return this back to the committee.
All right, thank you. That one's closed. Jim, what's number 5?
Number 5 is an opportunity to discuss what you may have read or seen in the executive summary to the final Los Padres alternative study. I wrote it as final draft, but I think it is now final. Thomas is available to address any of your questions if you have them. Otherwise, it was just included as an informational item. With that, I guess we'll just open discussion.
Okay, is this going to be a agenda? When is this going to be on the agenda for the board? May, June, or July?
That's
looking
yeah,
for
that's what I was just looking at. Joel, do you remember, was this on May?
I don't recall.
Yeah, I think we could
Yeah.
add it for May in the same, at the same kind of level as a discussion item. I know that CalAM has talked to National Marine Fisheries Service about whether or not a workshop or a public forum is held at any point. We've told AECOM, or I think, Thomas, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've told them, you know, we don't feel that we want to pay to have them come and make a presentation to our board. But if there's a public workshop or something at some point that, you know, we would participate in cost sharing on that.
Yeah, and it's my understanding in conversations with Armand Gonzalez of CalAM that CalAM, if they choose to bring this to a kind of a public forum, that they would pay for John Stead to come out and give that presentation.
Okay, are we, I'll get to you, you two in just a few minutes. Are we prepared to give a summary of this to the board and to the public? A good summary of it. Because, you know, I think this has been in what, 3 years of the making?
Longer.
And I hate to just go put it on the shelf and say, okay, we got it done. The public needs to hear about this one. So what kind of presentation can we do?
Yeah, I have presentation materials if that's the wish of the group.
Yeah, Thomas and I can work on this to present it. What I don't want us to do at this point is to make a recommendation, a district position. We made our position pretty clear in suggesting many of the alternatives, which have subsequently been canceled out as infeasible among the bigger number of parties. So what we're down to is looking at really 2 alternatives. And I think that there's pros and cons to each. And I don't think we want to make a district-wide decision yet as to what we think is the best way to go. So I think we need to take this information, certainly summarize it, make it publicly available, but you know, we as a group may want to meet on more than one occasion to decide what to do with this. Either way, there's a huge expense. Either way, there's no economical way to manage the sediment load on an annual basis, really. And based on our past experience with how regulatory assets get rewarded to the utility on a shareholder return basis, you know, there's impacts on the ratepayers of piling on another project maybe before it's time. So I think we present it, and if CalAm and NIMS want to have a public forum, we support that. But we're going to need to have a lot more discussion among ourselves.
Okay, Director Paul and then Director Rowley.
Oh, just my question was about the cost. Is there any source of funding besides ratepayer funding for this?
So that's something we've talked about. I've talked to our Washington, D.C. lobbyists about this. There's a lot for fish passage, but this could end up becoming a two-step process. It's reasonable to presume that somebody may say, well, let's take the dam out, and we'd say we might support that if we can ensure that the water right is protected. So in other words, right now the storage that we're taking the water from, or that CalAm's taking the water from, ultimately it's taken in real time from upland, upstream wells, or it's taken from the alluvium from downstream wells, and the alluvium acts as a big storage pot. But if you manage to keep the water right intact, yeah, we might say, okay, good idea. But there's a huge expense with that. And so maybe you don't want to jump right away. If you say, let's not do anything, leave it in place, it's going to silt in place eventually and have to be taken out in the future. So all you're doing is deferring a cost. But maybe that's cost deferral is something that we owe the ratepayers, because they're still paying for San Clemente Dam and they're paying for other stuff.
Yeah.
So let's say a cost deferral option is let's do nothing. Well, after a couple of years of doing nothing, the two fish regulators will say, wait a minute, you guys don't seem really intent on addressing this problem anytime soon, do you? You've kind of signaled that you're not. So we want to see some fish passage improvements right away. So now you're not taking the dam out, you're not managing the sediment flows, you're kicking the can down the road, and the regulators say, spend this money for now, and then when you get around to taking the whole dam out or leaving it in place and managing it, you can do it again. So chances are we'll be 3-4 years down the line having a discussion with the regulators about just fish passage alternatives. I mean, all of these things, unless you want to go to the ratepayers and say, well, we know you've got 21 more years of paying off San Clemente. That's $6.5 million a year, but can we add 30 of another 9 million a year or something? It's not a conversation that I want to have.
Understood.
Okay, George.
Well, I think when San Clemente came down, there was about 30 million. I think the whole thing was about 80 million or so. And I think there was 30 million of grant money that was available, but that had some real strong advocates in Sacramento to help make that happen. I don't know that that exists for the Los Padres Dam. So that's one problem. Dave, first of all, when I saw the font size of the executive summary and it was so small, that just scared me for starters. But just quick, and I think this is a big issue, a big deal issue. And at some point, we're going to have to kind of bite the bullet one way or another, however we're going to do that. But I don't see it as urgent unless, the state's kind of putting the pressure on us, or the feds, whichever one it is that wants the fish passage. But my question is that at least I wasn't looking for it until I finished it. And then I wondered, where is flood control? Is there any flood control issues on in this discussion? I don't remember seeing it. And the second point is, I don't know who the public might be that is most concerned about this issue. The public, I mean. And I'm wondering if it's Sleepy Hollow, or are there other categories of residential interests, consumer interests, whatever, real estate interests, that might be identifiable here. And I'm not looking for an answer so much, but that's where some of my questions are about going public, and then who are we like to hear from? Who are we likely to hear from?
Yeah, my understanding is similar to San Clemente Dam, that there's no real flood control benefit from Los Padres. But John or Maureen, if you think otherwise, or Thomas, please weigh in.
Yeah, there's no flood control benefit from Los Padres Reservoir. The real issue will be if they choose to remove it, a portion of the sediment that is behind there will find its way downstream and impact initially the Cachao community. So based on all the conversations that I've had with NOAA and CalAm and the technical review committee, is I believe there's still work to be done to understand that aspect of that project, if that was the route that was going to be taken, is, you know, how do we prevent additional flooding to the residents along the Carmel River, especially directly downstream from Los Padres Dam? That will be a huge issue. We know that the Cachao community will probably be very interested in kind of getting a little bit of a heads up of what's happening with Los Padres, what's the future. And I think that is maybe one of the reasons why CalAm and NOAA Fisheries would like to kind of air this out to the public, saying that there are two alternatives. One is to fix it and possibly dredge and have additional storage capacity, and one is to remove it and kind of gauge the community as far as like how they feel about it. And so that I think will be very interesting if it is, you know, in the next, you know, few months brought out to the public to see how they react to it.
Yeah, and on that issue in particular, you know, there are Cachao residents who are very concerned that it represents their fire protection, that when a helicopter is doing a dip, that this reservoir is their closest dip site, and you know, it's a health and safety issue. And then the other constituents are, and there's many of them that don't even reside on the Monterey Peninsula, but many who do, which is, boy, wouldn't it be neat to have returned the Carmel River to a 100% total natural watershed? You know, keeping in mind that there's quite a bit of engineered banks and habitat that look natural that aren't natural, but ignoring that, just wouldn't it be cool to have a natural river running? And you know, that's a tough one to compete against, but you're going to have, you know, American rivers for one, but also just, you know, fisheries people up and down the West Coast will say, let's make it a demonstration project. That's a good one. But without finding other sources of revenue, it's, you know, it's a difficult one to take to your ratepayers in this location at this time. So, and as far as the font, George, goes, I can't tell you, other than if you read it electronically, you can always blow it up to 150%.
I had a hard copy, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, as if I remember right too, Cachao is half in the district, half outside the district. So even if the ratepayers would pay for it, you know, not all of the Cachao community would be included in that, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, and their real concern is, you know, traffic, construction, impacts to their commute over the grade. I mean, they prevailed. You know, the initial route to remove San Clemente was over Cachao grade and through the Cachao community, and they said no way. And so they got a whole new road built and a bridge built over Tularcito. So I think they will be most concerned about how it impacts their day-to-day life and getting around, and then also the potential, you know, releases from Los Padres, you know, raise the Carmel River, which can help prevent some of the wells nearest to the alluvium from going dry. So I think that'll also be one of their focuses.
Okay, Karen, any questions on this one?
Not right now, thank you. But
Okay,
it does seem clear we're gonna need to discuss further what to do.
yes, and GM and Thomas, y'all talk to Cal-Am, see what they want to do. But I think the board and the public that we represent deserve presentation on this some way. And I even like to throw out the cost of how much we paid for this report. So y'all think about it. Okay, Joe, take that out to the public for me, please.
Yeah, so if you would like to make public comment on this matter, please raise your hand. Chair Edwards, I see no raised hands.
Thank you. Jim, what's the last item?
Last item, number 6, is just an update on aquifer storage and recovery. I think you thought this might be a final report, but John and his team have pretty much shown that we'll probably go to the end of the injection season with the ability to still inject, meaning, another few weeks to the end of May. But to date, so through April 23rd, when this was drafted, we had injected 1,156 acre feet this season. We continue to inject at about 3,000 gallons per minute, which means we are maximizing based on the current constraints, getting about a full 13 acre feet per day, give or take, which is good. But as the staff note shows, that if in fact we had the Monterey pipeline as a south to north supply, we could have been injecting 26 acre feet per day, or an additional 16, almost 1,700 acre feet. But we don't, and let's, get over it for a little while. But if we had access to ASR wells 3 and 4 for injection, and our maximum could have been 18 acre feet per day, then all things being equal, we would have gotten an extra 806 acre feet to date. But that's not the case. And this is where I think it's really important that we encourage Cal-Am to get its pure water Monterey extraction wells 1 and 2 permitted and under construction as soon as possible, so that next season we can actually use ASR wells 1 through 4 for potential injection and make our constraint that 18 acre feet rather than where we're stuck this year with only ASR wells 1 and 2, which we could only max out at 13 acre feet per day. So by assuming that starting on December 31st, that we could have made the maximum of 13, then we've foregone an extra 261 acre feet this year to date, trying to balance out the fire flow needs and the tank level needs due to the flooding of wells during the flood period, during the outage of the Pierce well, during the period where they couldn't cover for those things because the pump stations weren't yet ready. The whole variety of things that were going on that were competing with injection for ASR off and on during January and February and part of March. So, the 1156 through April 23rd is pretty good. We're obviously going to exceed the 1,300 acre feet per year average yield, which means that we've at least accomplished what you're supposed to accomplish in a wet year, which is not only produce what you'd like to get out of the resource for current need, but bank water. We're still hopeful that table 13 number will keep going up as well, so that we don't end up taking more out of ASR this water year than we put in during this winter, but we'll see. We'll just wait and see. But after the end of May, we'll do one more final report of a similar nature, just to show you where we ended up.
If we okay to bypass and Cal-Am said it's ready to use, can they start using it now to get more water over the hill?
No, they actually, we've been relying on that, the parallel pipeline.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've been relying on it in use all season long. So we would not have been able to do any of what we've done without it. So that was a good
so we
project.
have been using.
Yeah, we have been using it.
Okay. All right. Any other, go ahead there, Director Paul.
Yes, Dave, can you remind me what is lacking for us to be able to use the Monterey pipeline for injection? I can't remember.
Yeah, that
What's-
one, what's lacking is a huge spreadsheet with some agreement in place. And I'm only half joking. So we had a study by Cal-Am's consultant RBF, which originally determined that the plan for, let's see, smaller D-cell plant. That there would be minimal demand on the Carmel River during June, July, and actually May, June, July, August, September, October and November. So in other words, really trying to curtail reliance on the river during that period. That would mean that you'd be relying more on other sources, so that you'd in effect be storing pure water Monterey water from winter to summer. But a lot of this analysis also included a desalination plant as even extra more supply. So we don't really know for sure. Let me back up. So the way the Monterey pipeline was sold to the Public Utilities Commission was it could be bidirectional and really optimize winter injection rates and maximize the water right for ASR.
That's what I thought, yeah.
And that is not the way it's been slated for use. And I think part of that is due to the need by Cal-Am to extract pure water Monterey water every month that it's injected. And so it would take somebody really sitting down to say, well, wait a minute, let's pick 2 months of the year. If it's a wet winter, can you set aside January and February and run the system in reverse and satisfy all of the Carmel River demand with moving water from the Forest Lake tanks up the valley and utilize the Monterey pipeline to move water from Carmel Valley to the Seaside Basin. I don't know. That's somebody have to, as I said, get out a spreadsheet and figure out whether you can do the water balance. And there's other constraints on the system, but somebody, in Cal-Am in conjunction with us could address the question. But even without it, we've been able to show that if you had injection wells 1, 2, 3, and 4 available with none of these other problems in the valley due to flooding, due to wells going offline and so forth, that at that maximum, the 18 acre feet per day, that we would have no problem having a long-term yield from ASR of the 1,300 acre feet that we've been showing. John and I talked a little bit about that today, but it's the analysis that he did in his testimony showing that, 1.5 to 2 year return year means that not only are you meeting your need from ASR under current water, but you're also banking some. And that's the whole key to making ASR work is in 50% of the years, you're putting water in the ground over and above what you need from the project. And in 50% of the years, you're not. And so you're having to extract water from stored water to meet your yield when your annual yield is, at the 1,200 to 1,300 acre feet per year range. And so, we just need to let the project run itself. And we also have not made, a conclusive statement that rain is not going to be the same as it was in the past. Everyone says, oh, global warming and climate change, et cetera, et cetera. Well, this year is a perfect example of where you might be. You can have above average rainfall, or you could have normal rainfall that's just more intense and fewer episodes. We don't know yet. But we also don't know that we're going to be getting less rainfall on average going forward. So if you assume that the historical rainfall amounts are going to continue, but maybe they'll happen differently, fewer storms of greater intensity or more storms spread out over time, that's the piece that hasn't really revealed itself yet. But I don't think we are ready to say, oh, but you're just not going to get the rain. And so if the rain is there, then that means your average yield is there if you can meet your in-stream flow requirements. And so there's still some, stuff to learn about Mother Nature and what's going on. But this year was a really good example where, we're going to end up the year probably could have gotten our best year ever, better than 2017, certainly, on par with. And that means about 1,000 acre feet over what the long-term average yield of the project's supposed to be. So that's a good thing. Store the water for a future dry year. So going forward, that's where we want to be, is we want to turn that into a reservoir that can be relied upon in the half of the years that, or however many they are that are below average and the half that are above average. But
Fran has a question.
Yeah.
I have a comment going back to Director Paul's question on the Monterey pipeline, not the parallel pipeline. The Monterey pipeline that is costing our ratepayers $57 million. AECOM sized it at 36 inches specifically to handle ASR winter flows out of the Carmel Valley for ASR purposes. So we were sold a bill of goods, if I may speak bluntly. And what I really don't understand, and it seems totally intuitive to me, since the 1880s, the Carmel River was the primary source of water for the people in the valley, Carmel, what have you. And while it's not anymore, there still is a legal water right that is available to us in the wintertime. That water can be treated at the facility in Carmel Valley. Why is it that everything suddenly has to revolve around what's available in Seaside, and meanwhile deprive us of a water source that could be extremely beneficial to us, particularly with extraordinary flows like we had this winter? ASR is an important component. It's not operating the way it was designed to. CalAM's operations have interfered with it. And I think it's to the detriment of the community that what we pay for is not what we get. That's the bottom line. So Dr. Paul, you are correct about what the Monterey pipeline was supposed to do for ASR. And we are not being allowed to use that facility in that fashion.
And I hope we write that up in our findings.
It's part of our arguments, by the way, that goes back to the 2016 commission decision. And there's actually something in the current amended water purchase agreement where Cal Advocates challenged the size of the Monterey pipeline. And AECom wrote it up saying, no, it has to be 36 inches specifically to handle these ASR winter flows out of the Carmel River. So thank you very much. We paid for something and we're not being able to utilize it now. We did at one point. John has made that in the early days. We did have some access to it. It made a big difference. So I just had to get that off my chest. Thank you.
Well,
Thank
make-
you for
make sure
filling
you put it
in,
that
filling
paper.
in.
All right.
We
Okay,
have
any
a
other
clearer
questions?
picture. Thank you, Fran.
If no other questions, Joel, ask the public.
Yes, so if you have public comment on this matter, please raise your hand. Chair Edwards, I see no raised hands.
Okay, Jim, you have anything else?
I do not.
Joel, if you could stay online just to have a small chat with me after the meeting ends.
And I like to chat with a few folks too, while I got them. So Joel, you can adjourn.
All right.